Welcome to Powered by Instinct, a podcast for professionals who think about how your fundamental nature drives performance. In each episode, Kolbe experts will interview top performers, team leaders, consultants, and coaches to discuss identifying team members' strengths, aligning those strengths with their jobs, and optimizing individual and team performance. If you're interested in getting more done more naturally, then let's jump in.
Welcome back, everybody, to the 10th episode of the Powered by Instinct podcast. I'm Eric Herrera, our VP of Sales, and I'm super excited for our show today because we're going to go over a bunch of the cool concepts that we learned in the first 9 episodes. You know, we learned so much over this first season, and so we wanted to do a review show to discover, what are some of those key things that those amazing industry-leading CEOs that we met with taught us? What did some of our award-winning consultants teach us? And what did we learn from our own Kolbe experts? So with that in mind, here are some of our biggest takeaways from season 1. Question number 1, and arguably the most important or the most critical question, and it's how you really begin to start on this process of being free to be yourself. And that question is, what's the Kolbe A Index? To help answer this, we're going to hear from our founder, Kathy Kolbe, the inventor of the Kolbe A Index. And then Stephanie, our VP of training, is going to add a little bit of insight.
Well, the Kolbe A Index is pretty simple, very straightforward. It is an assessment of your strengths, your natural abilities, the way you do creative problem solving. So it's not how smart you are. It's not your personality type at all. It's how do you get things done when you do it the best, when you do it your natural way. So what are your natural inclinations in problem solving?
The Kolbe A Index is really looking at this part of the mind. We call it the cognitive part of the mind, but the easiest way to think about this is, what is it that you do when you are taking action on purpose? So when you are striving, you're putting in some effort to do something. So not just the stuff you've learned to do in school or learned through your experiences and the skills that you have, not just behavior that's driven purely by emotion. There's enough of that in the world, but really it's this part of the mind that really governs how we make decisions and how we creatively solve problems. And creativity doesn't mean that, you're painting or making a sculpture, although it could be that, but you can be just as creative with an Excel spreadsheet or a PowerPoint presentation in the workplace. So anything that you are really doing that is solving problems.
All right. So now you got your Kolbe A and you learned your natural strengths, right? You learned about your strengths in Fact Finder, in Follow Through, in Quick Start, and in Implementer. And then inevitably comes the number one question that we get here in the sales team. And that is, why should you compare Kolbe results?
We all have to work with other people. Some of us may prefer that we didn't have to work with other people, but realistically, you have people that you work with that you're inside of the company. If you're external, you work with clients or vendors or those kinds of things. And so you are going to have to adjust to others. And that's part of the reason we're doing this, kind of side-by-side comparison is here's some specific guidance on how do I adjust to Stephanie when I'm communicating with her? How does she adjust to me? Because, it makes everything go much better if you can at least move a little bit over towards Stephanie's side, or she can move a little bit over, towards my side when we're working together, when we're communicating, that kind of thing.
Pay attention in your, collaborations, your relationships, your interactions with others to areas where you might have some friction, and really try to pinpoint, where is this coming from? Is this a difference in skills or experience? Is this a difference in, maybe our personalities or our shared values or our commitment to this task? Or could this be an issue that is in this third part of the mind, which is all about how we solve problems and make decisions? And that's, the best way to figure that out is to actually, compare your 2 Kolbe A indexes together and run a report like this, comparisons A to A, as well. The other thing is, when you get these reports, if you get, sort of that very first page is going to kind of diagnose your natural conflict, your natural potential for conflict. And if you get low, don't just end there and be like, well, hooray, our relationship must be perfect. We're never going to have any kind of work friction, because you can keep in mind some of that stuff that Eric was talking about earlier, where you can still have competing ideas or competing data sources or all those kinds of things. So don't jump up and down just yet. I would encourage you to dig a little deeper. And then for those people who do find that maybe they've got some high conflict or some medium conflict, definitely use these tips. Try them out, see how they work for you. but also don't see it as a doomsday scenario. One of the parts of this report that I really love is the last page. And it talks about the power of collaboration. And the power of the collaboration is, we talked about earlier, there's the 4 action modes: the fact finder, follow through, quick start, and implementer. But there's also those 3 zones that we went through as well along the continuum. When you put those 2 things together, you get 12 different Kolbe strengths. And the more different you are, the more diversity you have across those 12 strengths.
Here at Kolbe, we have lots of different assessments, and that's just for the cognitive part of the mind, or the doing part. But there's a ton of really good assessments out there that measure things like the cognitive part of the mind or the affective part of the mind. So, what other assessments should I be using, and can I combine them with Kolbe?
Make sure the assessment that you're looking at is actually measuring what it's then going to measure, right? So don't, take the latest "What Disney princess are you" quiz and expect it to yield results that are actually valid and reliable. So know what you're getting, right? Know if the assessment can and should be used for hiring versus other uses that you might have for it. So that's actually one tip that I didn't even say that I think is really critically important. Like, for example, there's lots of DISC assessments out there, but there's only really a few that are sort of backed by research and that have been out there for a while and are good quality assessments. So first of all, I would say know what you want to do with that assessment and make sure that you have the right assessment for you. And then I think that it's really great to understand what parts of the mind are you really looking to measure to get insight and information and to work with and really look at those 3 things. And I think we actually have a great blog on our website and a download that you can use to kind of recap some of what we talked about with 3 parts of the mind and which of those assessments are right for you.
I want you to use some other assessment, DISC, Strengths Finder, PI, whatever it is, because it actually gives you a deeper view into that person. So here's what I can tell you about any assessment, whether it's ours or anybody else's. It's never going to tell you everything you need to know about that person, right? Stephanie, you're an 8363 in Kolbe. I don't know how you vote. I don't know what kind of car you drive, right? There are lots of things I don't know about you based on your Kolbe result. And that's, like I said, that's true for all assessments. And so each one of those is going to kind of pick off one of those parts of the mind. And we're basically just kind of stacking the odds in our favor that, hey, I know more and more about this person, the more assessments that I layer on.
Another biggie that we get is, why should you use Kolbe for hiring? And you know what? It's 2022 and employees have a lot of options right now. And being able to find and keep the right people in the right roles is everything as we look at growing our business. Here's how Kolbe helps with that, and a little sneak peek into how Amy Bruschi, our president, approaches hiring an assistant. Knowing this stuff is almost like a cheat code, because you get to peek behind the curtain a little bit and understand, all right, if I put this person in this seat, how would they actually perform in the job? Where most of the time you're sort of guessing, or you lean back on that, oh, well, he's a great guy, so he'd probably be a good fit here, or she's really smart. All right, let's bring her on board.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I love the phrase cheat code. I've never heard that before, but that's exactly right. It gives you this piece of information that's going to be helpful, because what it makes me think of when you say that is, people know what to say in an interview. I used to train on behavioral interviewing for years, and we would actually coach people on how to answer interviewer questions. And so if you ask someone, what will they do or how will they handle a situation, they know what you're looking for. There's a right answer. And so by looking at it in an objective assessment like the Kolbe A Index, you're going to get the information that you need. It also takes out that bias that you might have when you're listening to someone, or, as I said earlier, you kind of fall in love with a candidate. It's like, oh, I have to hire this person. They're amazing. And then you're going to start disregarding some of the other things about them. So you really do need to have that complete 3 parts of the mind look. And the cheat code is that piece we're adding. I'm in the middle right now of hiring a new executive assistant for me. So the first thing I need to think about is, what do I really need in this role? I need to get real clarity in this role. And in this case, I'm actually sharing this assistant with someone else, with David Kolbe, who's the CEO. So both of us need to sit down, fill out what's called a Kolbe C, and say, here's what we need. By the way, you don't do that together. We don't get to vote on it. We have to do it separately. Once I can get clarity, I can actually use the results of the process of taking our Cs and putting together that information with whoever's going to be the direct supervisor. In this case, it's going to be me, my Kolbe A, because I use this person the most. will then get what's called a range of success. That range of success is that profile that I talked about of an ideal candidate. It has fabulous information in there that you can use to create a job post. So what you want to do is you've defined what ideal is in this role. And so for me, I'll give you an example. I need this person to do a lot of calendaring, a lot of keeping me on track with time. I need someone who's very detail oriented, and I need someone who's fairly systematic and can accommodate some of the change that goes on. Once I define that, I need to put that into words, and the actual range of success that I get has some of that. From there, once it's established, then I just start having candidates take a Kolbe A Index. So they get to tell me, how would I naturally get things done?
So thanks to Amy, she showed us why we should use Kolbe in hiring. But you know what? It's not just enough to find the right employee. We want to find somebody for the long term. And that brings us to our next lesson. Once you find the right hire, how do you keep them?
When you have you bring somebody new onto the team, you hire a new employee, that kind of thing, from day one, if you know specifically, hey, here's how I need to have communications with him, with her, it makes your life so much easier. And, for those of you that are leaders, you should do the same thing with that new employee, that new team member. Let them know, hey, here's how I communicate. Here's how I'm going to do stuff, so that they're aware too, because in that kind of feeling out initial period, there can be some bumps in the road. This can help you to smooth those things out.
The first thing is understanding what their needs are and taking action, and get very specific to having good conversations around that. We have some excellent coaching reports that help the leader understand what they can expect from this person, but really anticipate what it looks like to onboard this person. Some people are going to have a longer ramp up, and it's not because of their capabilities and their intelligence, just because their natural way of getting things done is going deep into the details. They're not just going to guess. It takes them a while to feel like they're an expert and really jump in. That's important to know. Other people need to look at a whole rollout plan and have the schedule. Some people just jump in. So having that knowledge is going to help you onboard them better. But then you need to make sure that you're checking back as often as possible and saying, how is this working for you? Which tasks are working well? When are you kind of working against your natural strengths? And having some really good coaching tips around that. And of course, at 90 days, we recommend that you have that person take an assessment called the Kolbe B that says, here's how I currently have to take action in my role. And then we're going to compare that with who they are naturally and give them a great report with some strategies as well. So I think it's important at 90 days to see where we are, and then, keep going along the way.
So we've now learned how to hire and how to keep new employees. But eventually, those employees aren't going to be new anymore. And you know what? The best tend to be, the best at a lot of things. So now we need to figure out what's wrong with focusing just on what you're good at, as opposed to things that fit your natural strengths.
Some of you have developed these amazing careers where you have a lot of skills and, experience in certain areas, and yet you're taking on a lot of tasks that aren't necessarily a great fit for your natural way of getting things done. So the align step is where, what I love is, this is where we go beyond regular assessments. So there are typical assessments that give you an understanding of what are your strengths. And by the way, most of those tests out there are personality type tests, but they're just telling you one piece of the puzzle, and that's, here's who you are. But the next step is, do you actually get to be that on a daily basis? So when I talked about engagement in the beginning, I said people who love their jobs, those are the people that stick around and they contribute at a higher level. And here's the reason. All of our research shows that if someone is working against what is natural for them, it increases stress, levels of stress. And eventually, if left unmanaged, that's when someone's going to burn out. That's when they're going to quit your organization. And they don't always know why the stress is there, but the more aligned people are to the role and what the needs are, we find those are the most engaged employees. And as a leader, can you imagine that, your rock stars, the ones who are doing really well, are sometimes so stressed and you don't even know this. So to be able to pinpoint ahead of time, gosh, there's a little bit of an alignment issue in this area and we can do something about it. You're being able to predict when someone's going to be stressed long-term. So if you don't want to wake up one day and all of a sudden this superstar doesn't want to be in this role anymore or quits your organization, you have no idea why. So it really is critical. They're not going to complain, by the way. You know how this is. The rock stars don't complain. They just work harder. And that's not sustainable over time.
So, what's the path to creating and maintaining an engaged culture? Here's two industry-leading CEOs, Mark O'Donnell from EOS Worldwide and Stefan Wisenbach from Engagement Multiplier with some insight.
I would argue that cohesive and fun-loving teams can achieve high levels of execution and productivity over the long haul over a team that is just really good at executing and they hate each other. It's a little bit about longevity. A little bit of is a more of a human approach to it because, well, we got one life to live here. And why would you spend time working with people you don't like, doing things you don't like, even though you might be good at it? It can produce a result. That's not going to last for very long. And we don't think that that's the right thing to do.
Daring business now is the way forward. So it's going to be daring leaders and daring businesses that succeed. And DARE stands for define, ask, refine, engage. And I've rapidly realized over the last 90 days how powerful this is as a very simple approach, that in business, we sort of define a vision or we define a purpose, okay? Or we define a people charter. And we then go to our team and we ask them, based on a structure and a framework, how they feel about what's there. And we get their feedback. And then we refine what we thought because it needs to be relevant. And once we then end up with some collaboration, but this is not chaos because you are starting with a structure and framework from the top of the organization, okay, that's taking things forward. And then once you've refined what you're doing, you engage the team with it and move forward.
Now that we know that, the next question we need to explore is this. How do you use Kolbe to create an engaged culture?
So obviously, as a leader, it starts with getting together and making sure everyone understands each other's strengths. Then you know who you can count on to do what. And that builds trust immediately. If you have people who are engaged in their own individual roles and where there's a fit in the organization, so they're a great fit for the culture of the org and they're a fit for their job, they love their job. That person will love their job and engagement automatically goes up. And those are the people you want to build the future on. So an engaged culture is one where everyone's firing on all cylinders, where they're contributing at high levels, where there is some level of teamwork and knowing who should be doing what. So those kinds of things are factors that I think are hard to measure, but if we can focus a lot more on that and a lot less on, buying fun stuff and really great outings and bringing your dog to work and all of the things that sound like great perks, but don't necessarily move the needle. So the next step is, of course, how am I going to work with other people well? So it is about optimizing strengths and for individuals and leaders to think about who should be working together on what. So sometimes there's just over collaboration. Everybody's in the meeting together when not everyone has to be there. Sometimes two people are working together to solve a problem because of who they are in the organization or what their function is. But we haven't really thought about what are the ideal combination of strengths to get things done. And so optimizing strengths is about strategically collaborating and combining those strengths. And just a little bit of information makes a huge difference on identifying where's a team going to get stuck? Why do meetings go on too long? Why are we missing goals? It's not just because people don't have the time or don't care. Oftentimes we've got the wrong people collaborating and working together.
So far, we've been through a little bit of what Kolbe is and what it can do for you. Now let's take a look at what it's already done for others. Can Kolbe change a company's fortunes?
Part of our onboarding for every single coaching client that we bring on, they must take the Kolbe assessment. And we take that very seriously in terms of matching them up with what CRISP team members they're going to work with. We want to make sure that there's going to be as best of a communication forum as possible. And part of their package is actually for us to go out and do a Kolbe on-site training with their team. And we recommend that we do it sooner rather than later because it is so enlightening and it changes so much. I mean, I can give examples all day long. I had another firm and he's probably had most of his team members with him 10, 15 years, and they're cloning and they're all exactly the same. And he had no idea why they were just in this kind of rut, and he's like, this makes so much sense. And they were all initiating fact finders, and he's like, this can be a problem. Like, we're not going to move fast enough and keep up with things. And so it's just things that they didn't even know, for 10, 15 years, and then going in and being able to make that impact it's incredible.
Kolbe is the tool that our implementers teach at a very high level. And we've always been an organization that believes in simplicity and getting the most done in the least amount of time. And Kolbe is that one tool that you can make a huge difference in an organization. It creates a common language amongst the leadership team and hopefully the entire organization, where you're making just a big leap in team health in less than an hour's worth of time. It's the 20-80 rule to team health. It's just super, super impactful.
And then finally, can Kolbe change an individual's life?
Yeah, it sticks with people, and I've seen it change people's lives significantly. And even in really bad times, and I don't want to get off on a tangent with this, but my brother right now has been at Cleveland Clinic in ICU for 3.5 weeks now, and it's been a really awful situation. And my parents are both preventative quick starts. My other brother and I have quick start, and you got 8 doctors coming in and telling you so much information. And my parents' heads spin. They're already emotional about everything that's going on right now. And we know so many people with Kolbe over the years too that have had really significant, awful family medical issues and other types of things. And when you're thrown into those types of situations, like right now, it's a lifesaver, literally, because I know that if, for my other brother, for example, who's tag teaming with me, he would handle things very differently if I wasn't able to bring it back to a Kolbe discussion about what's going on,
Right.
with mom and dad. They aren't shutting down. It's the emotional thing. But 2, we've got change every 2 hours. That's significantly. I mean, 1 minute they're amputating his leg, and the next minute there's something else going on, and it's awful. And you got to be able to adapt, and yet, know kind of how to put the emotion aside as much as you can, but look at the behaviors of what's really going on in situations like this. And it's truly a game changer. And I think personally, when people really get it and understand it and embrace it and have that language that's a part of them, you see things. I think you see the world completely differently.
And I actually have a couple examples of those that I've even trained. And I'm thinking of one right now. I believe he's like an 8 or 9 quick start. And his entire team, as I mentioned, is usually surrounded by all of these initiating fact finders. And he has been in practice, 30 plus years. And when I went and did his Kolbe training, he literally closed the day and said he was so close to just closing the doors and being done with this. But now he's like, I understand why. He was basically like a tornado of ideas all the time, wanted to change, wanted to do everything. And he felt paralyzed by all the people around him. And it was just aha moment where the team was like, we get why he does this now. And he also
Right.
was like, we get why they are doing this now. And so it really, really helped as far as just communication and how to take on new initiatives. But yeah, he was ready to hang up his hat because of these frustrations. And he's happily still going now because they have an understanding of everyone's strengths.
All right. So those are some of the critical things that we learned during season 1 of the Powered by Instinct podcast. As always, the best place to start by learning about your natural strengths and having the freedom to be yourself is taking your Kolbe A at Kolbe.com. If you have suggestions, if you have thoughts, if you have things you'd like to hear us talk about, go to Kolbe.com/podcast, click that contact button, and let us know. Until next time, stay tuned for season 2.
Thanks for checking out this episode of Powered by Instinct. This show is brought to you by Kolbe Corp, a company that helps leaders and organizations thrive using the only instinctive strengths assessment on the market. If you enjoyed this episode, then follow Powered by Instinct wherever you get your favorite podcasts, or join us online at Kolbe.com/podcast for all the latest episodes.